Oops. Oh no, it's happening again. All right, there we go. There we go. I just had to back out and then hit accept and then go back in. Everything is fine. Everything is wonderful. Everything is slimy. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, depending on where on this gooey little ball you find yourself today. It's a wonderful slime-ridden home we call Earth. Yeah, I'm Ash, and today we're going to be talking about goo, slimes, vomits, and everything else that oozes. Let's get this gooey ball rolling. All right, so first we're going to open up by getting to know our goo, right? What are we talking about when we talk about slime? Because as we're about to find out, slime is a lot more soupier and messier than you've ever expected. So there are some basic categories of slime, but really quickly, we're going to kind of open up into slime as a particularly slippery taxonomic form. So we've got some biological slimes, right? Like this is probably what a lot of people think when they think slimes. We've got slime molds, which used to be fungi, but now they're their own thing. They're too cool for school. We've got biofilms. Those are pretty much a bunch of bacteria that come together and form a slimy little slime city. And then excretions. Oh my. So first, a slime mold. The slime mold that you might be familiar with, it's very common. This is called dog vomit is the colloquial name. I think it's really pretty. It's fuzzy. It's yellow. It's kind of like Winnie the Pooh. You want to hug it, but you shouldn't because it's slime. And this is a good example of a slime mold. What's going on inside of this thing? If we could get really close inside of the slime, you'd actually see it's a bunch of single-celled organisms that, as part of their life cycle, they get together and they hang out as slime. So this isn't one entity we're looking at. It's actually millions of tiny entities, and they secrete and create this extracellular matrix that is actually the slime itself, which I think is pretty neat. Also wearing matching dog vomit yellow today. So dressed to impress, just for the job you want, not the job you have, is what we're working towards here. Next up, we have a biofilm. This is an iron bog in the Pine Barrens here in the United States. This image is courtesy of Dr. Lauren Seiler, a biologist who researches these slimes amongst a variety of other things. And this is a biofilm. So this is a bunch of different kinds of bacteria and single-celled organisms hanging out together in a big soup of goo. That delicious orange color that you just want to ladle into your soup bowl is formed because this particular biofilm likes to eat iron, and the iron deposits naturally occurring in these bogs. This thing can conduct electricity. It can internally communicate. It's like a little city made up of a bunch of microscopic bacteria. And then we've got slime as a secretion. There's tons of images I could have picked for slime as a secretion, but I went with something a bit more academic and dressed up for the chat. So these are hagfish, and that's the goo that hagfish secrete when they feel threatened. This researcher is clearly getting ready to film a viral TikTok video, but this is also being used to make fabrics and in medicine. So one day you might be wearing a cloak made of hagfish slime. Embrace the gooey future. But slime is also experientially defined, right? So we've talked about some really different things that all meet the category of slime. And biologically, they don't really have a lot in common. You know, we've got fish, we've got bacteria, we've got single-celled organisms. There are fungi that produce slime. You know, like human bodies produce slime. We're all over the place, biologically speaking. So it's really more of an experience. The experience of contacting goo is kind of how we come to know this ooze. To wit, Katy Perry getting to know some slime. Classic moment from one of the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards. Slime is definitionally, this is also one of the things that might have come to mind when you're thinking about a talk on slime, right? The kind of overwhelming presence of goo, being just completely submerged in it. It's sticky, it's messy, it's gross, it's impossible to clean, it's everywhere, it's difficult to contain. And this is everything from those viral TikTok videos, ASMR slime sessions, to Nickelodeon, Noel's House Party in the UK. Like everybody just likes to dump slime on stuff for fun, as it turns out. And this is part of the experiential definition of what we're talking about when we talk about slime, right? Like this is what slime is. It's a process. It's a sensation. But slime is also a vibe. It's kind of just a way for goo to chill. So we've got like a vibes-based definition of slime, right? Because slime isn't static, right? Slime is a process. Right. It's not so much a singular thing that's tightly defined and self-contained as it is something that is ready to constantly erupt, and in fact is that process of eruption. Slime is something that is ready to kind of burst forth through the cracks, right? Like it is oozing, it is doing oozing as part of what it is. So as much as it, we kind of want it to be this taxonomically clean noun that we can lock into a tight thing, slime very appropriately resists that, and it overflows any container we can try to put it in. Or in the case of Katy Perry, it overflows any container we can put it in and then knocks us almost unconscious at a Kids' Choice Award. Oh yeah, sip and pause for effect as we move on to queering slime. So not that we need to make slime gay, but we're going to do it anyway because that's just more fun now, isn't it? So one of the things I want to touch on here is kind of the fluidity and potential of a queer approach to slime, right? To wit, Ghostbusters, kind of a good place to jump in if we're going to talk about queering slime. He slimed me like this moment. The subtext does itself here. There's a lot in whenever slime shows up in media, especially horror. There's so much queer discourse that jumps to the foreground that does not need any prying or any academic linguistic juggling. It just kind of jumps out at you. Or in this case, it just kind of like soaks you head to toe. But this isn't even really something that we need to do as like an academic exercise. This isn't something as kind of simplistic as, oh, that text is queer baiting, or we're like reading against the text to draw out a queerness in slime, which is, very common when you're doing queer discourses in texts and really like any other kind of other discourses. But if we look to slime itself, we can see that there's a lot of fun stuff going on when it comes to like a queer slime conversation. So Fusarium polycephalum, aka the blob, is a slime that's in an exhibit in France. And this particular slime has 720 genders, right? That's a lot of genders for anything, but especially a slime. And this is also very common in fungi. There are fungi with 10,000 plus genders, right? And these genders don't necessarily map back onto like a kind of readable biological sex. Slime and fungi are really doing their own thing when it comes to gender and sexuality. And this seeps back into text that we create with slime, text that we create with fungi. And you called it, whoever put this in the chat earlier, you called it, but we're talking about Prince of Darkness now. We move on to one of my favorite containers of slime. Prince of Darkness is a wonderful movie. It's part of the Apocalypse trilogy. I think it's my favorite entry in the Apocalypse trilogy, I think I'd say. The basic gist of this movie is that in the basement of a random church, there is a container of Nickelodeon gack that happens to be the son of Satan. And I think that there's so many like fun queer discourses that we can have focalizing the slime in this. And one is kind of like the apparent non-gender of the son of Satan, right? It's all of these humans, particularly like older men from the church and authority figures from a university that are gendering the slime, when in actuality, like the slime never assumes, performs, or states like a chosen gender through the course of the film. And in deeper actuality, it's shifting genders as it possesses new bodies and it moves from apparently cis men and women through each other. It's also deeply homoerotic. There's an entire character in this movie who's like, there's like a 5-minute sequence where the character that's coded as being a closeted gay man is literally hiding in a closet from two women who want to like slime him. So the subtext overflows its container thanks to the wonders and magics of goo. And this kind of leads me to like one of the bigger points that I want to talk about and touch on is that is this an anthropomorphized slime, or are we sliming the Anthropocene? So are we taking slime and projecting ourselves into the ooze, or are we kind of sliming ourselves when we touch it? And this is a point brought up by the wonderful book Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. And it's both. When we approach slime like this, we are simultaneously seeing something human in the slime and seeing something slimy within ourselves, which is deeply appropriate as we move on to the next film, Panos Cosmatos' The Viewing. I think it's such a great example of this, right? Part of slimy discourse is desire, right? What you yearn for is very difficult to pin down. Desire is often not for the thing desired, but for something else. Desire is often a proxy for deeper needs and deeper urges. You might, like the classic example, a man in his middle life crisis is going to want a hot sports car, and he's going to leave his wife for a younger woman. This crass example, but truly his desire is to run from death, right? He doesn't want the car. He wants to be young again. He wants something he can't attain, so the desire is sublimated. The viewing is a wonderful exercise in that, because it's a washed up artist, it's a budding academic, it's a flagging novelist, it's all of these characters whose desires are strewn all over the place, and they're unified by an alien fungal mass that is literally devouring their bodies and fusing them together, right? Their penultimate desires being achieved by being formed into some kind of slimy mass that escapes out into the world, this unstoppable thing. Which takes us on to some eco-gothic slime and diagnostic fears. Oh, my own slime reserves are depleted. I'm like getting quite parched over here. So what is the kind of function of slime in sci-fi and horror, or at least one of its oozing potentials? How can we, look at slime and have more reactions rather than, oh, that's gross, or like, oh, that's gross? So what can we kind of do with slime when it pops up, and what can slime do to us? So we're turning to the blob, kind of like, like when you think of slime, this is the creature, the invincible blob, the indestructible slime, one of the most iconic goos in all of media. It should have a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So much about the blob, I think, is interesting for kind of highlighting a lot of the tensions when it comes to slime, especially in a Marxist political context. This movie comes out at the peak of, Red Scare, Cold War paranoia here in the States. And one of the central fears of any slime appearing in a sci-fi or Gothic text is it's going to absorb you. It's going to absorb you. It's going to absorb your friends. You are going to lose your identity to the new mass that is the slime. And this is something that I think is appropriately terrifying, because any transition into a new period comes with those fears, right? Any encounter with something that seeks to fundamentally change who you are on a core level, one is, like slime, going to supersede the boundaries of whatever we try to assign it, right? We can't really know what it's like to be part of the blob after it devours us, because there's no reporting back from that other side. Parting the great veil of the blob, the true great equalizer, reducing men and kings to goo. Oh, we'll get to kings later. I added something fun in this one. But this is pointing towards something diagnostic, right? The slime is pointing towards a tension in our desires that's appearing in these Gothic texts. And one of the hallmarks of the Gothic is a certain sense of ambiguity, right? Whether this is literal in liminal spaces like tunnels and haunted woods and crumbling abbeys, or if it's more of a political or morally ambiguous stance. The Gothic is never quite as clean cut as a fairy tale. And so we're left to ask complicated questions of why the slime is pressing against our desires. And then this kind of ties into slime having a way of evoking our fears of new potentials. Slime is oozing out of our fears of collectivization, consumption, sexuality. It's our own capacity for being more fluid than we'd ever like to admit that is kind of at the heart of a lot of slime terror in media. Especially slime in sci-fi horror films. To it, let's talk about a bunch of slime. So the first example I want to talk about is The Stuff. The Stuff is a fantastic movie about these companies mining in the earth to harvest this alien, delicious whipped marshmallow fluff sludge that turns you into a hollow zombie full of the stuff. It's just the stuff. It's delicious. You want it. And the movie itself is the kind of, there's a lot of movies in this period that are, I would say, kind of crass attempts to assail being a consumer in consumerist culture. That kind of just like cap themselves at, oh, you shouldn't be buying all those fancy toys. They're very scolding. The Stuff, on the other hand, I think simultaneously recognizes the role of individual responsibility in larger systems, but also acknowledges that by the nature of being something systemic, it's very far out of the control of singular individuals. Like The Stuff is a quest to stop the stuff from spreading, but like any goo, it's too late. It's already everywhere. It's already inside you, in fact. And speaking of things already being inside you, The Thing. The Thing is another great slime movie. And rather than kind of like dwelling too much on the movie itself, although there's a lot of cool gooey discourse to have here, there's a short story that is written as kind of a pseudo prequel to the course of The Thing that I wanted to highlight. And in the course of this short story, we learn about the kind of interiority of the thing. And as it turns out, in the broader galaxy, everything is kind of the thing. Everywhere you go, you can kind of like freely interlace with other biological organisms. You can enter them and pass into them and truly connect with them. There's no questions of knowing, no questions of lying, no mystery of like, oh, did they really like me? What were they feeling? Because you could just be commune and be one with everything. And when the thing arrives at Earth, it's puzzled because it encounters biological life forms, but it doesn't know that they can think. And it's this interesting body horror of the thing journeying through the human body until it reaches the nervous system and the brain. And then there's this kind of wonderful awakening of terror where, from the thing's perspective, we are barely sentient creatures imprisoned in this like stone catacomb of a skull. And in order to try and communicate, we have to grunt and make noises. We have to carve symbols. We have to try and externalize our thoughts rather than just contacting something and knowing, right? It I think reveals to us that there are potentials in slime and potentials in goo that far outstrip what we're capable of, which I think is really important because there's often a kind of dismissal we have towards things that are slime. Right. You know, like slime is coded as being incredibly negative and dangerous and not fun to be around. Slime isn't smart. Slime isn't useful. And that, I think, is very not useful for having more fun conversations. Right. And this is especially, there's a research project where slime was taught how to navigate a maze, and then you can bifurcate the slime, cut it in half, and then both halves of the slime that you just chopped in half will still know how to navigate that maze. Like that is a phenomenal superpower that no human can accomplish. I mean, I also want to talk about Lechago's Bioslime, which was billed internationally as, I think, Alien Contamination, and then they changed the name to Contamination in the States. It's one of these wonderful B movies that's lived 1,000 lives. It is such a wonderful use of slime for exploring misplaced desires and the kind of frustrated contemporary eroticism that our society is just rife with. It's a plot of a bunch of people locked in a hotel. There's an arms dealer trying to sell the slime, which is an alien biological weapon. There is a sleazebag porno company in the next room over trying to film just a bargain bin porno. And then there's some random people trapped in this hotel. And it is this slime monster slowly taking over all of them, and all of their desires colliding and washing over each other. And it's conflicts between gender and sexuality and capital. And it is just, it is a horrible movie, but it is fantastic for looking at how slime can be used to communicate greater desires. Boop. So now we're getting into the celestial vomit, the fun stuff, the star stuff, or the star slime. So I want to think for a second about that classic Carl Sagan quote, right? We are the stuff of stars. It's so warm and lovely and aggrandizing. You know, the cosmos is inside of us all. But what cosmic materials kind of made their way to our wayward planet? You know, it's the stuff blasted off of the formation of stars. It's literally celestial vomit. In the creation of stars, it is excess material erupting and being ejected back out. It's the refuse of existence that winds up forming humanity and the earth and the moon and everything we know and care about. The entirety of the human effort is simply just reorganizing the day that a star vomited into the cosmos. And I think that's kind of beautiful in a weird way. I think that allows us to recenter a few things and to kind of lower our guard for a moment with the kind of celestial aggrandizing that comes with much more like waxing poetic ways of looking at this. And this is rediscovering wonder in a fistful of goo. And this kind of leads me to my next point, something more cosmic and more open. And what is love, if not in and of itself, a type of slime, an emotional goo, if you will? So a quote from Alain Badiou in one of my favorite books, In Praise of Love: "We could say that love is a tenacious adventure. The adventurous side is necessary, but equally so is the need for tenacity. To give up at the first hurdle, the first quarrel, is only to distort love. Real love is one that triumphs lastingly, sometimes painfully, over the hurdles erected by time, space, and the world." And this, to me, is slime. Slime has been around for longer than mammals, right? Slime is this eternal factor of life. And even after we're long gone on this rock, there will still be goos and oozes and fungi and lichens and all of these other creeping, crawling masses scouring the earth for whatever they can eat. There's a particular type of biological microbe that's slime in all caps. And it is an extremophile type of bacteria that lives in subsurface pockets of water and stone. And some of them have never experienced light, right? These are beings that are outside of the cycle of life that involves photosynthesis, even in the slightest. It's so bizarre. But how tenacious is that? To live against literally every single possible odd, right? And unlike being star stuff, unlike being a random assemblage of cosmic junk, we are the tenacious descendants of the most tenacious slimes that have ever lived. Those first primordial oozes that gooed and bubbled together before they congealed into new masses that spread out and became plants and trees and fish and everything. That is our lineage, this invincible slime that has lasted through every struggle thrown its way. How many extinctions has slime suffered? And if slime can accomplish that, if the literal goo that we call dog vomit is capable of these things, just imagine what the power of love is capable of. It's the most hackneyed thing I have ever said, but it's so true. Okay, so celestial vomit. So I want to talk also about the kind of utopian potential of slime, right? So I want to talk about Ernst Bloch and this idea of a concrete utopia. So when Ernst Bloch is talking about the concrete utopia, he doesn't mean concrete in kind of the sense we would think about it today, construction materials, right? It's, excuse me. It's not a view of something that is already built and formed and it's entirely out of a material that can't be destroyed or harmed. It's concrete in the sense of concretization, right? Something that accretes pieces over time until it builds up an edifice that is the thing in and of itself. Right, so something that is slowly evolving, gathering new pieces, building, becoming greater, things that often have failed starts. If we look at utopian projects throughout our society, whether they're contemporary communes that have popped up in Portland, Oregon, the Paris Commune, or attempts at more structured ways of making society a better place, experiments with socialism, experiments with democratic socialism, New Deals, et cetera, and so forth. We've got a lot of false starts, but along the way, we're accreting new ideas, accreting new social technologies, accreting new industrial technologies that hopefully over time will continue to accrete. Slime isn't singular. Slime never arrives. It's always this process of oozing and undulating and moving. It's, even though slime does have fruiting bodies, slime is much less like the tree, where it has kind of these definitive and easily delineated spots. Slime, particularly when sliced outside of the kind of taxonomical and biological structures that it represents, is this thing that just keeps flowing. And now we're going to talk about some slime, some utopian slime. So this little clip right here comes from one of, I would say, probably the most critically successful film of all time, the live-action Super Mario Brothers movie. Often applauded and celebrated as the peak achievement of human art. I think that's not controversial in the slightest. But through the entirety of the movie, there is this kind of oozing, slimy, fungal mass throughout the entire, Koopa kingdom that we visit. And it is this fungal mass that winds up saving the day. As we see here in this clip, it's attempting to give our heroes a weapon that they can use to defeat King Koopa and to save the princess. And our heroes dismiss it as slime. They keep rejecting these offerings of gifts because they don't see the value in communing with something that's made out of goo. And through the course of the movie, we come to learn that this goo, this fungi, is the former king, is the benevolent king that everyone used to love until he was de-evolved into slime. But what I would argue is that it is his de-evolution. It is him returning to the state of slime. It's him embracing the kind of this kind of rendering of the most base quality within himself that allows this kind of utopian potential to flourish. You know, he is life in a dying world, and that's because he was forced to cast away being a monarch, being a ruler. You know, now he is literally something that people shovel out of the street to get out of their way, and it is only at that point that he is able to save the world that he is in. All right, now we're going to talk about another slime, another favorite slime of mine that I think does this really well. So this is Toxie, the Toxic Avenger from the animated Toxic Avenger series. And what I really love about this is that, so in the course of the events of the Toxic Avenger, right, Toxie starts off as a nerd who's a janitor at a health spa until bullies throw him out of a 2-story window and into a vat of radioactive waste, which transforms him into this hideously mutated being of superhuman size and strength. And what I love about this is it's the contact with the slime that opens up his potential for heroism, right? This is not something that was always in him. This is not something that would have bloomed one day on its own. He would have lived his life in obscurity and solitude and suffering under the cruel weight of others, if not for this encounter with slime, if not for being forcibly dunked into something and emerging as a creature that, as we can see here, is torn apart and covered in ooze. And if we like one of my favorite things about the Toxic Avenger is his choice of weapon, which is a mop, which is such a wonderful play on the phallic nature of weapons to choose a mop. And it's also a device of goo. Mops handle and move sludge. They themselves are an extension of greater slimes. And this is slime as heroism. And if these potentials exist within that which is slimy, or the slimic, if you will, what do they exist in us, or how do they exist in us, rather? To that, we are kind of slime anthropomorphized, a temporary cephalic organization of various slimes that exists in a unique formulation that has an awareness of the mind. Slime is the only unescapable thing. Everything is already always slime. The greater mass of humanity, the psychic weight of all human effort, is just slime at distance. And what I mean about this is we are a barely contained bag of slimes. Even within our bone is a delicious slimy marrow. You know, everything about the human, from the slime that is in our brains to the slime that pumps through our bloods to the slime that just erupts forth from us, whether in pleasure, whether in sickness, we are kind of defined by this hidden quality of ourselves that is being a slime. And I think that this, for me, is one of the most just beautiful things to consider, that everything is just slime in various stages, that we are all so much more connected, and we're connected by something so hilariously gross. It's not the magic of stars, it's the magic of goo that binds us all together. And last time, so the Q&A went super long and it was super fun, and hopefully that'll happen again. So I think with that, I will gracefully, slimily bow out, and we'll open up to a fun little discussion.